Hi, everyone, and welcome to a special Tramelcast of the Neil Haley Show, the Storehouse Media Group podcasting Criminally Good with Jen and Sherrie. Guys, who's our guest today?
We are blessed today. We have Jenny Hyland with us. She is a retired Deputy Chief Constable, former Royal Canadian Mountie, and just a very lengthy, long career, just recently retired. She's the new author of Tightrope, Balancing Duty with Courage and Conviction. That is her new true crime and based on her life. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Uh, I gotta ask, what got you started in law enforcement? What led you down the path? Who who was it, or what was that moment that you said, I'm gonna have to do this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would say I accidentally happened upon policing. I had graduated from university, thought I'd actually go to law school. I wrote the LSAT twice and didn't get what I thought was a high enough score. Was super disappointed, had spent my whole life thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I'm like mid 20s and I didn't even apply to law school. So I go off to Europe to find my way. I come back. I'm super confused. Don't know what I'm going to do. Feel like a loser. Living at home with my parents still. Hate my life. And then one of my best friends was killed in a car accident. She was traveling in Australia and was killed. And I watched her parents have to go over and figure out bringing her very injured brother home and deal with the aftermath of the car accident. And when I was recovering from getting over her death, a friend of mine from high school, I just happened upon one day, and he had become a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer. And as I was sitting talking to him about my experience, I just remember him putting his hand on my shoulder saying, you're at a stage in your life where you really need to have a purpose, and you really are sounding like you want to help people, because I was just dealing with this massive loss. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and said, I love what I'm doing. Why don't you try it? And so policing had never dawned on me. I put in my application and started the process. And about a year later, I was hired and started the job. And so I owe my career and everything that I've done as a result of being a police officer, probably to honor my friend who passed away, and this future colleague that just looked at me and said, you don't need to have it all figured out, but you have a passion for helping people, and this is an option for you. And it never dawned on me, and so that's what got me there.
It sounds like you definitely did find your purpose, and I'm sorry about the loss of your friend, because I know that's not an easy thing to talk about or to go to move on from, but you did, and you used that to inspire you, and that's good. And I'm glad you found your purpose. So don't want to overlook this moment. Three of us on this camera right now entered law enforcement in a field that we weren't exactly the most welcome people at the academies when you first got started. So just a little bit about that. You're kind of a trailblazer there in Canada as well, as far as getting into law enforcement. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, there weren't a lot of women. I mean, growing up in small towns and where I lived, I never ever saw a female police officer. I had interactions with great men and I worked with great men, but I never saw anybody that looked like me in policing. Once I got in, I think there was about 120 people in the police department I started at, and there was 14 females. And so we were I wouldn't say called trinkets, but they felt that whatever it was that we came to work with, we needed to be split up. And so couldn't have too many of us together, because God forbid you actually had something happen at work that was female related. So we were all split up into different units and watches. And so I only ever worked with about one other woman at a time. And so, yeah, I would venture to say now when I look at because of things like 30 by 30 that were started in the United States, I see women not only in the role, entering the role, but being trailblazers in leadership now, and in really speaking up for the diversity that we bring, the diversity of thought. There's 51% of the population is female. It's ridiculous to think that we shouldn't have a very important role in public safety. I mean, we understand 51% of the population. And so I'm really excited to see where it is now. And I don't know if I see myself as a trailblazer. I feel like those women before me were trailblazers. I just did my best to not ruin what they'd done and to really shove us sort of through the door a little bit more, you know, in the vein of like, okay, now we got to go to some uncomfortable conversations, and I'm prepared to do that. So,
All right, I relate to that quite well.
You know, Jenny, I really enjoyed your story of how you got into. I mean, it was just like it was an accident, but you told your story. I mean, you were lost and you had a tragedy, and you kind of flipped it around and did something good with it. And then early on, you got into child abuse and sexual offense unit. So walk us through what that was like and how that could have shaped you as the leader you became.
yeah, you know, again, I think some of it was just sort of happenstance, or maybe either meant to be, or I don't know how to word it. When I was early on in policing, because I was the only female on the watch often, I hate to say it, it's not, I have a lot of time for my male colleagues, and they are amazing police officers. But when the sex assaults came in and the child abuse came in, the level of cringe you could kind of see on most of their faces, like, I'm going to have to talk to a kid. Well, most of them didn't necessarily grow up babysitting or dealing with little ones. Or like a woman that's just been like violated by a man, and they're a man in uniform walking in. And so I really recognized there was nothing they could do about the fact that that was their gender, just like in some cases, there was nothing I could do about my gender. But I could really make a difference for all of us in that world. And so when those files came in, I put my hand up. When I had enough experience, I applied to the full-time unit to do that as full-time work. And even years later, when I was actually trying to transition out of the work, I recognized there just wasn't enough people willing to do it. And so I guess you would call it less of my passion and more like I felt like I had an obligation to do this work for the most vulnerable people. And I had an obligation to do something for my colleagues that either maybe they couldn't do, but I felt that I could do. And so no matter where I went, care and concern for vulnerable people in every file was like one of the top things I always wanted to insert myself into if I could.
Did you ever talk to United States police officers and know the difference between policing in the United States and Canada? What do you see in the difference and how you guys operate compared in the US without being a blanket statement? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I think so. I've had some really interesting, since the book, I've actually had quite a few conversations with American police. Throughout my career, a little bit with how we would interact as if something federally or border wise happened. That would be sort of the reason, something to do with internet crime or child abuse online. But I would say that the abuse in the files and the victims, it's the same no matter where you go. Trauma is trauma. It doesn't matter which country you're in or what uniform you're wearing. The manner in which they're investigated in the States, and I always found this interesting, is certain types of crimes and files become federal offenses that your FBI will do. And then there are other files and crime types that your community policing will do or your state policing will do. And what's interesting, and I don't think this is a difference, there's often either conflict or information issues that happen in the United States when a file becomes something that multiple layers of organizations get involved in. And what's interesting is that still happens in Canada too, because the RCMP is a federal investigation. They look after everything federally. But then we have contract police officers that work in towns, municipal police officers, provincial police officers. And one of the biggest cases I was exposed to, and I have this in the book, was the massive serial killer, Robert Pickton, who murdered close to 50 women and often fed them to the pigs on his farm. That case happened over the course of many years because the police agencies just couldn't figure out how to information share and work together. And so I think the issues that we have are the same, and the offenders, they're not different in Canada versus the United States. But I think one of the things when I look at American investigating, there seem to be things that both countries are able to do that the other one can't. So I was often, jealous of some types of investigative techniques the Americans would use, but then our interviewing ability and some of our techniques were things the Americans would say, we would never be allowed to do that. And so I just think there's a lot, there's give and take, but a file, when you abuse somebody, it really, the trauma, the difficulty for the victim and the investigator, it's the same no matter where you are. I hope that answers specifically.
No, and it does. So do you see a difference? No, because thinking about it, and this is something that we've talked on this podcast, Jennifer and I, on Criminally Good, especially about where we're looking for how our police department's going to operate in the United States with changes, different specifics. What do you see in Canada and how the laws are different for a police officer than the United States? Do you any know that stuff?
Yeah. Certainly some of what gets the pace at which, what I was always jealous of is the pace at which your system works. You have a file unfold and you're in court relatively quickly. And in Canada, there's this slow moving disclosure and various articles that we have to go through, that the court cases can take years and years and years just to enter court to start. And that was one of the things, like if we were going to talk about one of my cases, the tragedy of the case falling apart was how long it took to go to court. And what was a little victim boy no longer was a little victim boy when the court case came. And he didn't want to get on the stand and talk about what had happened. He was now older and ashamed. And so I think your system moves a lot quicker than ours. I think ours would say, oh, it's all safeguards for protection of the offender to make sure that accused are innocent until proven guilty. So do I think both of our systems sometimes convict innocent people? Yes, but there's legally, criminally innocent, and then there's like a technicality that makes you innocent. And so I don't know how to fix those systems. They're so clunky and they're based on so much years of case law. But yeah, I feel like your system functions better than ours. And yet when I talk to American police officers, they disagree. They're like, they don't like their system either. They would rather be in our system. So I think it's kind of that the grass isn't greener on the other side. The frustrations that each of us have are missing in the other system, but you're just trading one system frustration for a different version of that.
Okay. All right. What do you guys think on that?
I think it's interesting. I think really basically human nature remains the same. It's just kind of the procedures.
Very
I
much
agree. Yeah,
different.
100%. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
You ended up working professional standards. And as I understand that for Canada, professional standards is like our internal affairs with our agencies. So you had to investigate your own. I mean, how did you balance that? I mean, how did that work for you as to having your life and still being one of the cops and at the same time not, because you kind of, if it's like down here, you get a little ostracized.
Yeah, I didn't go into that line of work because I was interested in actually investigating other police officers. But when I went into it, I had established myself as a very outspoken, do the right thing kind of investigator, like very not corruptible. Like if something was going wrong, I'd be the person to come up and say it. And one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to internal investigations is that 99 or a large, most police officers get into the job are ethical and moral. And yes, they're human and they make mistakes. But I thought it was important. I went into it at a time where I felt some internal affairs investigators felt that it was their job to flush out and ruin the careers of people who'd made mistakes. And I had seen firsthand the tragedy of a police officer maybe being like falsely accused or misinvestigated and what happens in their careers. And some of them even committing suicide because they could just never recover their career after the allegation. And so I went into it as much to make sure that when there were dark-hearted people that I had to investigate, we don't want those people in law enforcement. You have to do a really good job at that investigation. And I had been a serious crime investigator for years when I made the switch, but also that, I had an obligation to be very mindful of what I was doing to the reputation and the personal life and the career of officers who had given a lot to people around them, and maybe in a dark moment or a bad time in their life made a really bad choice on a file, and they didn't think that they needed to lose their careers over, but they needed to be held accountable. And there was a few files where I always said, like, your job is not to say that you didn't do anything wrong. You have to own it, but you can have a career after that. Like, we have a lot of respect when people can take responsibility and accountability, and the community will trust you more when you can put up your hand and say, yeah, I missed that one. That was a mistake, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to do what I need to do and move on. So I did it for that reason. And I think because people knew in my heart why I was doing it, I didn't have a reputational issue or backlash. I think there was a sense of peace that I was going to do the job well. And the officers I investigated felt better about me being in that role because of that.
So
Sounds
it
like
was,
you kept finding. No, go
yeah,
ahead,
well,
Sherrie.
it sounds like, not only were you, yeah, I want to get the dirty cops, but I need to protect those who are good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you wrote the book, Tightrope, Balancing Duty with Courage and Conviction. I love the backstories of why people write their books. What is the backstory to your book? Why did you write that book? And if you could tell us a moment where that balance felt the most important to hold and how you found your footing again on that.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of moments that happened in my career when I became relatively senior. There were two times. One, I had become the chief of police of my hometown in Maple Ridge when I was with the RCMP. And so I was in charge of about 200 people, 130 police officers, 70 civilian staff. And I ended up going for a breakfast with a colleague, and she was a corporal rank. So we'd stayed good friends. I had gone further up the rank, but we were still very, very close. For me, it didn't matter to me what the rank was. This was like a friend and a colleague of mine. And at breakfast, I was sitting there and I was talking about, there was something going on with my kids. I was dealing with my teenagers. I was irritated with my husband. It was just like, pick up your socks already. And you know what I mean? Put the dishes in the drawer, like the typical kind of like lamenting about my life. And then I was questioning something. I was having some real difficulties with a couple of elected officials in town who were trying to get me to do what I thought was corruption. Like they were actually trying to corrupt me. And I felt, obviously I was having a significant reaction to the pushback that I was doing because I refused to do it. So I was saying all this stuff to this colleague over breakfast, and I was lamenting and saying how difficult it was. And I looked up and she looked like I had punched her in the face, and she was sitting there with her fork in her hand and she hadn't taken a bite of the food. And I'm like, I'm sorry, have I said something to offend you? And she's like, I have watched you for years and thought you were perfect. Nothing bugged you. You skated through all of it. You look good. You're acting good. You never lose your shit at work. And she's like, I can't believe you're telling me you have these struggles. And I remember thinking my heart broke in that moment because I thought, what horrible leadership style that we often do in policing, that we walk around like we've got it all figured out. Life is perfect. And all we're really doing, we think that we're being this great leader. And what we're doing is putting off this false impression that maybe others are like, I could never go up the rank because I can't be as good as that person. And I remember thinking we should really be more honest as leaders about the struggles, because then we can share that it is difficult, but you can recover, you can get the support, you can be hurt by something going on in your team and still have the leadership role. You don't have to be this frozen inside kind of person. So I remember thinking I had not seen any leader around me be honest about their struggle. And that was the reason why I never did it, because I thought we're just not supposed to talk about this stuff. So when our breakfast was over, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I started being the leader at work that would share like, hey, that file was really difficult and that really bugged me. I didn't sleep for a couple of days thinking about it. I just thought it was important to be authentic and honest. And the amount of feedback that I got from the teams was just like, nobody talks like you. I've never seen a leader like you. And I'm like, they're all a lot like me. They just don't want to talk about it. And when I went to retire, I thought someone should really tell the truth about this stuff. Someone should really tell the truth and just talk about the stuff that we don't talk about. And so when I retired, I spent a year writing Tightrope because I thought, what a shame. I was no longer in the world to speak it to people, to show up in the room and be supportive. And I thought, I need to put a book out there that allows people to read it and be, you went through all that and you could still show up, or maybe I can do the same thing, or I'm not weird for feeling that way, for crying, for being upset, for losing sleep, for being mad. I'm not the only one that got picked on, all that kind of stuff. And the moment that I hit send, when the publisher said, "Are you ready to go?" I hit send on it. And then a couple of people really close to me said, "Are you nervous?" And I'm like, "About what?" And they're like, "You've just told some very, very private stuff to everybody." And I'm like, "But what a shame it would be to have gone through all that, die, and then no one ever being able to know what happened and that it's possible." So that was why I wrote Tightrope. I wanted people to know you are not alone in the struggles of life. And it doesn't mean that you have to wear a uniform. You're not alone, that parenthood is hard. I mean, there's postpartum is real. I didn't have it, but I suffered from an illness right after pregnancy. Childhood was hard. I didn't love being off as a mom. I found it really difficult and no one talked about it. And so I just wanted Tightrope to be a roadmap or hope or a lifeline for anyone who was just too afraid to tell what their story was, and my story would maybe help them do that.
Jenny Hyland, that response tells me exactly why you won the International Association of Women Police Mentoring and Coaching Award. Yeah, you're saying so much of what I never heard much in 32 years of law enforcement from my supervisors and superiors that expressed anything like that. It was always refreshing to have a supervisor that was a regular person. They had their good and bad days. They let us know, hey, I made a mistake on that, or you know what, there's a better way to approach this, and I'm not going to just jam you up because there's another way to get this done and get it right and get back on track with what we're doing. And you just expressed it all. The gentleman who talked you into going down and filling out an application, he must have seen a whole lot in you in that moment. And yeah, you found your purpose without a doubt. You need to be a speaker. You need to be a consultant. You need to be out there because there are a lot of agencies, not just law enforcement, but fire departments, EMS, paramedics, private industry that need to be hearing that so that people realize that, hey, just because they're in that suit and tie or up in the executive branch, it does not mean that they are perfect at every aspect of this particular job we're all doing out here.
What I love about your story, Jenny, is you got into a career accidentally and you worked your way to the top. And you know what you did? You remain human. You remain empathetic. You remain sympathetic. And like Jennifer said, a real person. Wow.
Thank you
very much.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something just to finish up. It's just basically the process is that you're not afraid to share. I think that so many police officers, new ones that are going to develop, need to know what that expectation is, the PTSD, the trauma, everything that you're going to go through and how we figure out those resources that are together. I just signed a working agreement with an organization that they'll probably will be a sponsor on this podcast. I'm not mentioning it yet till it comes out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's going to help the law enforcement with the mental health side, with training and development through technology. So really, I see such an important opportunity that you're carrying, and to tell more people to really take care of themselves. And it's okay to feel the way we are okay, but we have to also have everything in place for police, law enforcement, and EMS. So when they go through these trials and tribulations, they're not waiting till they retired to figure out they have a problem, to address it then. Kind of like concussions now in the NFL. When you go and get your ball wrong, you don't go back on and play 2-3 plays later. They go and they do protocol, and if they consider it's a concussion, you're out for 2 or 3 weeks. That was not the way they used to handle concussions. The same thing they have to handle when a serious trauma happens. You should not be, you should have the right proper recourses available for you early in the process. So
yeah, I totally agree. What's interesting is that for years people thought PTSD happened when you were involved in a really big incident, and so many police officers and first responders are like, I didn't have a big incident. No, but you went to thousands of deaths, traumas, files, and so PTSD is like that small little drip into a cup. Eventually, some people's fills up quick, some people's fills up slower, but everybody gets their cup filled up. And that's the conversation that I think everybody needs to have, and people were uncomfortable having for years. So I love your analogy about how football has changed their perspective. I think law enforcement has a ways to go before they reach the same
so then
stage.
somebody has to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
for anything, any types of trauma, when you deal with something that's trauma or many traumatic events, yet you look like, hey, I'm tough enough, my brain can handle it. We don't know about our subconscious. We don't know what's handling us and how much it's building on. And then also we think about the stress factor, the factor that the stress in your health and your body and everything that we're not looking at in wellness for police officers, EMS, and that. Well, yes, these traumatic events, we all handle them differently. Some people can know how that not get to that fight and flight mode, but the constant hit, and one point in time, it's just you're gonna break. And
Yeah.
that's where we have to have a better therapy, better protocol when it happens.
Well, I'm the poster child for press all the trauma down and then have your body revolt, because when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, they told me that you being resilient and just squishing down all your files and going to the next one without ever dealing with anything is what caused your body to turn on itself. And so I remember thinking I got rewarded for taking the files and getting back in it. And yet my reward at the end of the day was MS. And I wished somebody had said to me, if you don't process half a dozen of these files before you take 10 more, you're going to have a medical condition that will never be able to be cured. And I remember what I felt like the day I was told, your approach to resilience got you sick. It was just like this shameful, mad, angry, like, what the hell, everybody? Like,
Exactly. You can
I
be
couldn't
angry.
unring the bell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't unring the bell of what I'd done. Yeah.
You went and
terrible.
sacrificed your life to something, and then this is the result you get. And this is where you have to say, am I given this for one reason, to go ahead and help so many more people? We have an opportunity in this day and age when, what can we do to make our life fulfilling and help others? And you did it by writing the book. Where can we go check out your book again? Best place?
The book is on all the online platforms, so you can get it through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the Indigo chapters, and then it's in select local bookstores, but really just kind of where I live. But anybody, you can get it online if you order it. It's Ingram Spark puts it on thousands of platforms.
Do you have a author website too?
I do. JennHyland.com, not Jenny Hyland, JennHyland.com is the author website.
So go to storehousemediagroup.com for all things publishing, ghostwriting, media, and marketing. And then also go to JenniferClarkeEskew.com to purchase her best-selling book. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks again. That was the special Simulcast, the Neil Haley Show, the Storehouse Media Group podcast, and Criminally Good with Jen and Sherrie. Take care, guys.
We'll be talking